That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, my dudes, this is one of those videos. This is one of those videos where I know we are going to get so much hate coming in our direction, which I am perfectly fine with y'all going down there to the comment section and telling me that I'm dumb, telling me that I don't know what I'm talking about. I actually encourage you to go, and if you disagree with me, let me know your opinion. But what I need to hear is I need to hear your side of the explanation, because this is a 20-minute video of me going through and explaining why I am not drafting these players in 2021. So if you think that one of these players is actually a nice value, go down there and tell me why. Don't just stop at, Mason, you're an idiot, you have no idea what you're talking about, because we all know that's true by now. Now, explain why I am stupid and explain why other people watching this video should go through and actually draft these guys. While you're down there, make sure you drop a like. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Just past 30,000 subscribers, which is ridiculous. And also, I know that so many people have heard this announcement already, but you know I have to hit it with you again. If you want to support this channel, the number one thing that you can do is go get our 2021 Fantasy Football Draft Guide. The easiest way you get that draft guide is making a $10 deposit on Underdog Fantasy, where we are live streaming every single night, live fantasy football drafts. Come out, draft with us, make a $10 deposit, get a $25 bonus added onto your account with promo code FLOCK. Get my draft guide, get my rankings, get my tiers, and everything that you need to crush your leagues in 2021. And that should be it. Let's dive into this video. Let's talk about my 5 players you cannot draft this season. And the first guy is going to be Kyle Pitts. And what's going to be really fun about this video, guys, is, I mean, unlike a lot of people, you know that I am actually going out and investing a ton of money into fantasy football this year. You know how many leagues I'm playing in. You know how often I am going and jumping into those drafts. So I've already done close to 100 drafts this season, and I can talk about exactly where I'm drafting these players. And no, this is not me going through and saying, oh, I've done 100 mock drafts. No, I've done 100 real money paid leagues, fantasy football drafts. And I know exactly how many of these players I've drafted. And our first guy in Kyle Pitts, we have drafted in one league. We have drafted in one league when we are over 80, closing in on 100, depending on when this video is uploaded. Maybe we've already hit 100 leagues in 2021. So you know that Kyle Pitts is someone that I'm never considering. And the main reason for that is over there on Underdog Fantasy, I feel like people have lost their mind. They're drafting Kyle Pitts consistently in the 4th round of fantasy drafts. Kyle Pitts, who his ADP on Underdog Fantasy currently, his ADP is 47 overall. So that's at the end of the 4th round. We go through it. If you pull up my rankings, you pull up my tiers, my draft guide, whatever you're looking at, we have him ranked at 62. So if you're following our rankings, you wouldn't even consider drafting Kyle Pitts until the 6th round of your fantasy draft. And to go along with this, what's really funny is if you go through, if you look at some other tight ends in this range, on Underdog Fantasy, Mark Andrews is being drafted at 60. TJ Hawkinson's being drafted at 62. If you look at our rankings, we actually have it kind of flipped the exact opposite. We have TJ Hawkinson down there at 52. So it looks like a great value at ADP. And the same thing with Andrews, where we actually have Andrews at 56. So I'm higher on both Mark Andrews and TJ Hawkinson compared to consensus. I'm ranking both Mark Andrews and TJ Hawkinson over Kyle Pitts this year. And I'm going to be the first person to admit, guys, yes, the first person to admit Kyle Pitts is the best tight end prospect to ever come into the NFL. And it isn't even remotely close, because we have seen this so many times before. We have seen the story of a tight end that comes in and he's an elite level athlete. He has the size, he has every single traits, but there's one thing missing on his profile, and that's the fact that he didn't really catch the ball in college. Where we have seen the exact opposite thing, where we have seen that tight end get used heavily as a receiver in college, yet they get to the NFL Combine, and we know, and we actually lay this out in our Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide, which you can have access to that draft guide as well, 100 plus pages of how to evaluate rookies coming into the NFL, and also talking about this 2021 rookie class. But we laid it out that it's surprising to see how much athleticism actually matters at the tight end position for evaluating these players coming in. So when you had those tight ends that were productive and you didn't see them necessarily popping off in athleticism, it's concerning. Where with Kyle Pitts, you have no concern on either regard, because you look at his production. And guys, Kyle Pitts, keep in mind, Kyle Pitts just turning 20 at the beginning of this year. He started out 2020 at 19 years old. He came out in the SEC at Florida, averages 96 receiving yards a game. So at a tight end position, when Kyle Pitts is about 19, 20 years old, he almost averages 100 receiving yards a game in the SEC. He goes out there, has over 8 targets a game, and a touchdown a half a game. A touchdown a half a game is just one of the craziest things you're ever going to see from a tight end that's 19, 20 years old in the SEC. It's ridiculous. And you see the same thing in 2019 when this is a season that he played at 18, 19 years old, and he averages 50 receiving yards a game, over 6 targets a game. Kyle Pitts is a monster. And you go and you look at what he did at his pro day this year. Guys, he came in 6'6", 245 pounds. He has the longest wingspan in the NFL. The longest wingspan in the NFL. Ridiculous. He's framed like a super jacked basketball player, to be completely honest. And then he goes out there, and at his pro day, he runs a 4.44 40-yard dash. That is the speed of a super fast receiver. That is, you see a receiver running at that speed and he's like 6'1", just say 210. You're jumping up and down. You're going, okay, he clears and he surpasses our minimum speed threshold. For a player to do that at 245 pounds, that's 6'6", that is ridiculous. And I know a lot of y'all are saying, well, Mason, didn't you just say we shouldn't be drafting Kyle Pitts? Yes, you should not be drafting Kyle Pitts. Because the problem is if you go through and you look historically of what has happened over the past 25 years in the NFL, guys, tight ends simply don't produce their rookie seasons. It sucks to say, and I know a lot of people want to say that Kyle Pitts is just going to get used as a receiving option. And if that's going to be the case, yes, I think you can consider moving Kyle Pitts up into maybe the late 5th round. But there has never been a tight end that has ever come remotely close to having this ADP his rookie season at the tight end position. Very, very rarely do tight ends ever come out and even average 40 receiving yards a game. It's something that almost never happens. So it's kind of crazy to see, while yes, Kyle Pitts is one of the best prospects of all time, people are completely ignoring that the tight end position is by far and away the hardest position to develop at the NFL level. Because we already see with receivers coming into the NFL, it takes them a decent amount of time to get the route tree down. It takes them a decent amount of time to develop into a player that can be playing on every snap. Well, what sucks about the tight end position and what takes an Eric Ebron so long, even though Eric Ebron's a great prospect, what takes a TJ Hawkinson so long, what takes just all of these guys that come into the NFL and they don't produce their rookie seasons so long, is the fact that you have to learn how to be both an offensive lineman and you have to learn how to be a receiver. So you really don't want to be investing into these players their rookie season. There's a million things that you can look at. There are a million different data points to show you that those rookie tight ends are not historically good bets. And that's when they're being drafted in the double-digit rounds. That's when they're going, after someone, that's when they're going after someone like, just call it a Dallas Goedert this year. Whereas to have Kyle Pitts in a range where the only tight ends that are going ahead of him are Travis Kelce, George Kittle, and Darren Waller, that's about the most reckless thing I've ever seen. You go through, you look at Mark Andrews, who's 25 years old. Mark Andrews was the tight end 6 in 2019. He was the tight end 4 in 2020. Now, he's 25 years old. This is someone that's going to continue to progress through his NFL career. You should expect this overall offense to be a little more pass happy this season as well. Rashad Bateman dealing with an injury. I think Mark Andrews, a significantly better bet, and that you don't have to wait for him to develop whatsoever. He should be close to becoming a finished product in Baltimore. TJ Hawkinson, 24 years old, and last year at 23, he was the tight end 5 in points per game. TJ Hawkinson has already been a top 5 tight end. He is competing with literally nobody for targets. You're going to tell me that a Brashad Perriman or a Tyrell Williams, they're stealing targets away from a TJ Hawkinson? So the problem is, with a Kyle Pitts, maybe if you're playing in like a casual or redraft league where people don't necessarily know what they're doing, they're not necessarily as tuned in, and you can steal them pretty late, then sure, go draft Kyle Pitts. But the problem is, if you're playing in one of those underdog drafts in particular where people are, for whatever reason, in love with Pitts, and people have been tuned in all offseason and just saw how great he was coming out of Florida, it's going to be a spot that I'm looking to avoid. Now, our next player, I mean, we kind of talked about this already, so we're going to keep it brief. Michael Thomas. Now, with Michael Thomas, I am just kind of appalled at his ADP right now, because the problem with Michael Thomas is when you draft him, if you're playing in a league where you cannot put a player that's going to be on the PUP, you can't put a player that's going to be out at the beginning of the season on your IR, he is someone that you should not consider drafting for a second. Now, I will say that if you're going to be able to put a player that's listed as out on your IR, then it's a little bit of a different story with the Michael Thomas. So just understand that your league settings, they're going to dictate so much. If you don't understand your league settings, you don't necessarily know how to find that. Just make sure you shoot a message to your commissioner. Make sure you can figure that out. But here with the Michael Thomas, the problem is right now his ADP is at 87. He is going ahead of players like a Michael Carter or an AJ Dillon on Underdog. And I've drafted him out of those 80 plus drafts that we have done in 2 leagues. And with the Michael Thomas, we actually have him ranked down there at 116. We have him directly behind Devontae Parker, Michael Pittman, Mike Gesicki, and Melvin Gordon. I have him directly ahead of a couple quarterbacks, Robert Tonyan, Gus Edwards. And here with Michael Thomas, I just simply can't invest into a receiver. We don't necessarily know if he's going to be healthy this year. This is someone that ghosted his head coach, ghosted the training staff, ghosted his receivers coach, then all of a sudden just popped up randomly in June in New Orleans after not talking to anybody for 3 months, and he was supposed to be going through rehab, and he was like, hey, this ankle still ain't working. I haven't done anything on it. We're going to have to go get surgery. This is an Antonio Brown situation all over again. This is Antonio Brown with the Raiders. You all remember when Antonio Brown went to the Raiders, he was being drafted in the 3rd round. Then all of a sudden that video comes out. He's saying that he's freed and we have no idea what's going to happen with AB. And then we don't see him all year. I'm kind of afraid something like that's going to happen with Michael Thomas right now because he isn't on the same page with the New Orleans Saints. And at the same time, he's injured. So who's trading for him? Now our next player at the very top of draft, so I know we're going to get a lot of hate for it, Derrick Henry. And I've drafted Derrick Henry in about 3 leagues so far. 3 leagues is like nothing. And here with Derrick Henry, the reason I'm listing him as a do not draft guy is because his ADP currently is the 3rd player overall. He is going behind only Christian McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook. And I understand with Derrick Henry, guys, that if you're going through, you're playing mad and you're trying to just determine the talent level of a player, of course, you're all in on Derrick Henry. Or if you're playing in a non-PPR format, then yeah, go right ahead. Draft Derrick Henry as aggressively as you want. In a non-PPR format, I'm all in on you taking Derrick Henry at 3rd overall. But the problem is, how many people are actually playing in non-PPR formats? I'm pretty sure that the majority of us, at least almost all of my leagues, have some kind of points per reception element to them. And when Derrick Henry is just a one-dimensional running back and that he is not getting usage in the passing game, then you have to drastically alter your rankings of Derrick Henry, understanding that he has a very limited ceiling. And I know a lot of people are going to say, Mason, you fool. What do you mean limited ceiling? This was a running back that finished with 2,000 rushing yards last year. And that's exactly my point. My exact point is when Derrick Henry goes for over 2,000 rushing yards last year. Can we all get on the same page right now? And can we all agree that Derrick Henry going over 2,000 rushing yards, that should be his ceiling. That should be the best season that you are expecting from Derrick Henry. I don't think it's getting better than that. Unless you think Derrick Henry's going out and then rushing for 2,500 rushing yards, which of course you could never project. Okay, so we're all in agreement that Derrick Henry is a running back that his ceiling, and he is fully capable of reaching it, is for rushing over 2,000 rushing yards in the season. Now, let's try to translate and see exactly what happened last year when he did hit his ceiling in fantasy points per game. Let's pull up another running back that right now is currently going behind Derrick Henry in Alvin Kamara. I don't necessarily think that we have seen Alvin Kamara's pure ceiling in fantasy football. Now, yes, he had a ton of positive touchdown volatility last year. That should probably regress this upcoming season. But beyond this, Alvin Kamara averages almost 5 points per game more than Derrick Henry last year, with Derrick Henry going for over 2,000 rushing yards. That should tell you that fantasy football is a little bit broken when you're playing in a PPR format. When you're playing in a PPR format, a running back like Derrick Henry that's going to be catching no balls out of the backfield, he is just at such a deficit. and that we go through, we look at some other running backs in that range. I mean, I currently have Ezekiel Elliott, Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara, all of those running backs ranked ahead of Derrick Henry. And the problem is, if you're looking at someone like a Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry, and let's just assume that you actually have Derrick Henry going out there rushing for 2,000 yards. So he picks up some receiving yardage at the same time. He gets 2,200 total yards this next season. And then with the Saquon Barkley, bad offense, not going to necessarily be able to pick up the same type of rushing efficiency, even though I think that he's probably a better running back. That's besides the point. Let's just say Saquon Barkley goes out there, rushes for 1,400 rushing yards. So 600 rushing yards less than a Derrick Henry. And at the same time, we have seen the ability for a Saquon Barkley to go out there and average close to 8 targets a game. We have seen Barkley have more targets per game than Alvin Kamara, and how that's going to translate not only to receptions, but also to receiving yards. So he's going to be able to bridge the gap there with his receiving usage and his receiving yards compared to his rushing yards to a Derrick Henry. And then you go through, if you say that Saquon Barkley is going to have 50, 60 more catches than Derrick Henry, you translate that to yards, and this is how broken fantasy football is sometimes. You translate 60 receptions to yards, add another 600 yards to Saquon Barkley. So understand that if you're not catching the ball, you have, I want to say, a limited ceiling, as crazy as that sounds, because you see Derrick Henry run some people over and you're just assuming that you're winning your fantasy football league. Whereas when you hit your ceiling with Derrick Henry, he's just reaching his ADP of being the running back 3 in fantasy. And at the same time, this is a running back that's now 27 and a half years old. This is historically when you see the fall off. You go along with this, he's had over 800 total touches the past 2 years. So Derrick Henry, if he's going at 3, I cannot draft him. Give me Davante Adams, give me Alvin Kamara, give me Barkley, give me Ezekiel Elliott, and let me know if you think I'm wrong down in the comment section. But I need a pretty damn good explanation, just not Derrick Henry big, Derrick Henry fast, Derrick Henry win. Now let's go to our next guy. Let's talk about Mike Evans. And here with Mike Evans, honestly, I did not necessarily think I was going to have this take. I did not necessarily think I was going to be fading Mike Evans this upcoming season in fantasy until we were going through and doing his chapter in our 2021 draft guide, where we go through and we actually look at a Mike Evans and go, well, crap, this is someone that averages 0.8 receiving touchdowns per game last year. This is someone that averages less fantasy points per game last year than Chris Godwin, with Chris Godwin suffering multiple injuries throughout the season. I know Mike Evans was banged up a little bit near the end, but the difference here is that you actually have Mike Evans as a player that is significantly older than Godwin. He was drafted in 2014 compared to when Chris Godwin was drafted in 2017. You actually had Godwin with more volume on a per game basis last year. And at the same time, you actually have Mike Evans still not reaching the same level of production, even though he crushed Chris Godwin in touchdowns. And we know touchdowns is not what you want to bet on going into the season. We know touchdowns are going to be volatile. They're going to go up and down, just because they're a small sample thing. Whereas the volume, the targets per game, that's going to be a little stickier. So you always chase volume. You always fade touchdown usage. And here you actually have a Mike Evans looking like he's going to regress slightly. I think that Chris Godwin's going to get a bump up. And what's so funny is right now, you actually have Mike Evans with an ADP of 34 compared to Chris Godwin, who outproduced him last year, who's 3 years younger than Mike Evans, who at the same time was banged up last year. He's going 7 picks behind. So I haven't been drafting Mike Evans at all, because every time that they're both on the board, I'm taking Chris Godwin. And just because of that, I mean, have I ever had a real chance to take Evans? Not really. Okay, so now let's go over and let's talk about Robert Tonyan. Maybe the easiest fade in fantasy football this year. Okay, so you go through and you look at what happened last year, talking about touchdown spikes, talking about how volatile touchdowns are season to season, where usually you have that spike year and then it's probably going to regress the next year. Well, we know the entire Green Bay Packers offense, they're going to regress with the amount of touchdowns that they have this upcoming season based on just Aaron Rodgers being such an outlier last year. I'll say, of course, they're still going to be above the league average. Aaron Rodgers is a great quarterback that's going to drive the entire offense. And there are multiple pieces in this offense that I do like. We like going and getting in A.J. Dillon. We like Aaron Jones. We like Davante Adams. But here, in the case of Robert Tonyan, no, not at all. This is someone that was mainly, and I want to say primarily, just fueled by positive touchdown regression that you had with Aaron Rodgers. You go through and you actually look at what happened last year. I mean, he averages 3.68 targets per game, okay? So he averages about 3.5 targets a game last year, and he averages 0.7 touchdowns per game. Now, I don't have a calculator in my mind, but I will say that's about 20% of his targets are being converted to touchdowns. That should not happen. That literally never happens in the NFL. And whenever something comes that close to happening, you better believe it's going to take a nosedive the following season. So you're looking at Robert Tonyan, you're looking at the fact that, he averages 36 receiving yards a game last year, and that's it. And I think there are multiple other tight ends that are going behind him that I may actually prefer straight up over Robert Tonyan. We go through, I currently have Robert Tonyan ranked at 120. His ADP is at 114, and I've seen it consistently rise in underdog drafts. And the problem is not necessarily the Tonyan ADP. It's more so the tight ends that are going behind him, I just think are way better values, where Irv Smith is going at pick 127. You have Mike Gesicki at pick 133. Love me some Mike Gesicki this year. And then you look at our rankings, we have Irv Smith all the way up at 128. We have Mike Gesicki 20 spots higher than his ADP. And this is before the preseason game. We have him at 113. Jonnu Smith, we have about in line with where we would expect him to go in drafts. So yeah, it's not necessarily that I am fully against Robert Tonyan, but the problem is, Mike Gesicki is going 20 picks after him, and I have Mike Gesicki ranked over him. So why the hell would I ever draft Robert Tonyan, someone who's going to get regression hit to him where it matters the most, and a player that I think is a clear avoid. Now, thank you, my dudes. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. Of course, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. Come out to the live stream tonight. I promise you we'll be live streaming every single night until the season starts. And yeah, that's all I got for you. And have a great day. Thank you to everybody supporting the show on Patreon. We got some new members in MCGC, Brian, Matthew, Craig, Ian, Woody, Colt, Marcus, Jack, and Nicholas. Thank you, my dudes.